Christy, thank you so much for hosting us here at your office, Drew Eckl Farnham. Thank you for being on the Great Retention. So excited to just get your insights about what your experience has been and as a law firm with employee engagement and retention, but thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So maybe let's start. Would love to just tell us a little bit about the firm, maybe an overview, and just to give our audience kind of an understanding of your employee today.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are a law firm. We have about 250 total employees. Law firms do a lot by attorney headcount to know how big we are. We've got about 120 attorneys. We're headquartered here in Atlanta. We were founded in 1983. We're a full-service law firm specializing primarily in defense, but also have corporate litigation and some individual litigation and legal support. We have three other offices, I apologize. One in Albany, Georgia, one in Augusta, Georgia, and one down in coastal Georgia and Brunswick. But our largest footprint is here in the Atlanta office.
Got it. Okay, so 4 offices total.
4 offices total.
Okay, so a little bit spread out. So maybe tell us a little bit about the culture at Drew Eckl Farnham. So tell us about, I'd love to hear, give us an idea of what that's like as an employee, but also love to hear from your perspective as a leader, what does the culture mean to you?
Yeah, so, the culture here is, and I'm not going to say we're like a family because that's got such a bad stigma to it these days, but I mean, we generally like each other and genuinely like each other on a day-to-day basis. We get along. And so what makes us kind of the 3 pillars of our culture is we take pride in what we do, at all levels of the firm and all job functions. We take pride in our work product and what we're providing. We also are always looking for ways to improve. So finding ways to just operate more efficiency or to provide solutions faster to our clients. We also work as a team. I can't tell you how much like us working as a team is so integral to what we do, both at the smaller level, individual attorneys and their support teams, to the entire firm coming together as a team. And that really is the core of kind of who we are. And that's really what makes us so successful in what we do is those 3 pillars.
Got it. That's interesting because I know that from our conversations before, there's a big difference between being in a mid-size, firm and feeling like you're part of a big team or one team versus a larger firm, right? So maybe share what maybe.
Absolutely. So one of the things that you really notice, or what we try to take pride in here, is that each individual person is a core part of who we are. There's a core function that you perform, and there is, and you feel like the other people in the team. I know all of our employees. I know who they work with. I know what their strengths and their weaknesses are. And many of our leadership teams kind of feel the same way. We're all part of this together. We're all in that team together. One of the things that you kind of see in larger law firms and larger companies, whatever, is that you almost feel kind of like a cog in a wheel. I mean, of course, you're going to be close to your team members and those people that you see on a regular basis, but you're not going to know this. You can't walk down to the COO's office and stick your head in and say, hey, do you have a minute? I've got a problem. And so, good or bad, I tell my people, if you've got something, come talk to me. I want to hear about it. That's what makes us better, is when you say, I have a problem. How do we fix this? Or I have an idea. How do I implement it?
Yeah, sure. And I know that, having that sense of connection is really important. Now, over the last year or so, as we've been remote, right? Obviously I can't just walk down the hall to Christy, the COO, and say, hey, I've got a problem, or I need help, or can you, and so I'm just curious, what's the firm's experience been, as you've navigated, working remote? Where are you now? Right? Are you coming back into the office? Obviously, we're here.
Right,
but,
we're here.
Just so maybe share a little bit about what's your experience been? How have you navigated that? Any lessons learned from that?
So, in March of 2020, just like everybody else, we shut the doors and we did a mandatory work from home. We're happy to say that we were one of the first law firms here in the Atlanta space to require people to go home because we wanted to take care of our people. We didn't know how serious it was at the time, but we knew that there was a risk. And so we said, guys, we heard about this. We knew it might be coming. We're prepared. Go home. Be safe, and you can work successfully from home. We are so very, very proud of how prepared we were and how we were able to have the tools ready to go home. Now, I know we joke that some corporations were like, yeah, this is all the time. But like in law firms, that was actually pretty unique because it wasn't part of the majority of law firms' cultures to not work in the office.
Right.
So, pre-pandemic, lawyers were in the office, staff was in the office. Now, lawyers had a lot more flexibility because they had to be able to work from courthouses and other law firms for depositions and various things like that. So depending on their schedule, our attorneys had a lot more flexibility and a lot more ability to work elsewhere. But our staff, outside of a few exceptions, were in the office.
Yeah. So it was a big transition then.
It was a big transition. It was a lot of technical support. Give a shout out to our CIO, Jason Landers. I mean, he made sure that we were prepared and ready to go. And we had a management team here. We have an emergency response team. I cannot say enough good things about them. But this isn't really about all of them.
Right. That's okay.
But we really did a great job. But it was a big transition for us culturally once we realized, oh, we're going to be here for a while.
Yeah.
How do we do this now, right? How do we make sure our teams are communicating and holding on to that team environment when they're not next door and they can't walk out and they can't stick their head in each other's offices, which was such a big part of our culture.
Yeah.
And so, again, we had some tools in place. People didn't really use them. We had Microsoft Teams that nobody used until March, and mind you, they were fairly new tools in March of 2020. But still, we didn't really have a lot of adoption quite yet. And then with Microsoft Teams, that was the first thing we really pushed for people to stay connected. And just like when I said you could just come down to the COO's office and stick your head in the door, that didn't really change, except for instead of sticking your head in the door, you were sending me a Teams chat message, or you were calling me on Teams. I made myself very available for Teams calls as much as I could, and I told people, I want you to reach out to me if you need me. I can't always promise I'll be available, but I'll call you back or whatever. And so people were still very comfortable with reaching out to their team members in this new face-to-face, but on Teams, right? So, so we tried to stay connected that way. And then, culture-wise, because we didn't really realize how much a part of our culture was embedded in us being here together.
Right.
So you don't realize that some of that is starting to slip until you've already eroded some of it. So. And
how did you know that it was eroded? Did you lose people?
I did. Well, we lost a couple of people, and I don't think it was specific to the erosion of our culture, but we started noticing less of a teamwork environment.
Okay.
A lot more of people not jumping in as much as they used to, or not communicating as openly as they used to. And that just happens when you're at your home and you're in your office. You don't have the same incentive to communicate with people. So I heard from people that they would go, weeks without talking to more than one person or whatever. I mean, and I'm like, how can you? I mean, they were like, we emailed, but I'm like, we got to talk more, right? It's not the same. And so we started really focusing on, okay, we're losing a little bit. And you know what? And the teamwork was the first one, because that is really the pillar of who we are. But the taking pride in our work, that didn't really slip. We still kind of felt that doesn't matter where you are when you take pride in your work. That didn't. But even the improvement piece, where you're always looking for ways to improve, a lot of that was, when we come back to the office, we'll look at ways to improve, or we'll do that training when we come back to the office. So it was always when things returned to normal. And so there was a lot of things that just kind of got pushed because we were just focusing on surviving, not just surviving work, but surviving our kids being home or being stuck in our houses. Yeah. And so as a leader, it was our job to recognize that those things were happening and saying, what are we going to do? And so we talked about how we get people to interact. We tried some of those virtual socials. I think for some of the partners, we did like a virtual wine tasting. We did some trivia. We just tried to find some ways where people could connect. We encouraged our small group affinity groups to, like, 4 people would get together on a Teams call just so they felt connected. Mm-hmm. So we had, we would just do random groups of 4 and say, all right, affinity group, here's your group of 4, schedule a lunch, submit it to the firm, or we would send them an Uber Eats gift card. Okay. And so we kind of found ways to encourage them to interact again. And that had some positive impact. And then we also, I want to say December of 2020, we implemented Cool Leaf, which allowed our, for those that don't know what Cool Leaf is, it's an employee engagement and rewards kind of system. So it allows them to interact with certain challenges, and a lot of them are social, but some of them were rewarding them for participating in mental health and wellness challenges to prevent burnout, and take the time to think about themselves. And some of them we used for education. If you participate in this activity, before it was the free lunches, the cupcakes, the desserts would encourage people to come into the meeting rooms. And you always got to do something to get them away from their desk. We had to find a new way to do some of those things. So we got creative, but it became a priority even more than saying this is what we do and we just kind of have to make sure it's continuing to move and be implemented.
Got it, yeah.
We had to really be intentional and connecting people.
It sounds like initially it was like, well, hey, we'll just get back to it once we get back to normal, right? So you just kind of put a pause on what you normally would do to be intentional. Exactly. And then there was some moment where you're like, okay, this is going to be here for a while, right? And so now it sounds like there was just a dedicated focus. Okay, how are we going to bring people together?
Absolutely.
Right? Awesome to hear you say Cool Leaf was a part of that.
Yeah, it was.
But that was, we just want the ability to create kind of connection, right?
Absolutely.
And people feeling like they're part of a team.
Yep.
So yeah, that's eye-opening to me what you said, which is someone shared with you that they hadn't talked to anyone except for one other individual for a number of weeks.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right?
And so to me, that as a leader, that's like, no, that is not, if teamwork is part of our culture, we've got to absolutely address this.
And it's not intentional, right? I mean, we were all just so busy trying to survive because you got to remember, work wasn't the only thing we were all dealing with, right? So that we were focused on our work culture, but so many people had so much that they were just trying to survive that it just got lost. There was nobody saying, is everybody accounted for? Are we making sure that we're all part of a team?
Yeah, people are working even longer.
Right.
Right. Which goes into the mental health and burnout.
Absolutely.
And some of the areas you shared there. So, so this is really, really helpful just to hear, kind of the inside story, right?
Sure.
So, one of the big buzzwords right now, people talk about, I hear from other leaders, is the Great Resignation. Right. So, individuals moving to another job for one reason or another. So I'm curious, at the firm, have you experienced this? Perhaps with I know we talked a little bit about larger firms starting to recruit now, but what's your experience been? Are there things that you've been doing to, offset that? Just curious kind of overall what your experience has been.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to say that we're special because I do think we're special in a lot of ways, but we did not escape the Great Resignation like other firms in our industry, but across all industries, we're feeling this Great Resignation, and it almost feels like a talent shortage. There's just not enough people for all the talent that we need, and so one of the big things that we're trying to focus on is what we had talked about earlier. Is we can't always compete with these large firms. I mean, historically, these large firms were not recruiting from the same talent pool as we were. Not sure why, but there was enough talent that we posted a job, we had multiple candidates, and then it was about who had the right experience and who fit our culture. And there was a candidate pool that we could choose from for that one job opening. Yeah. Now we have 5 job openings and the same 2 or 3 candidates for multiple job openings, because these larger firms who have bigger pockets and actually deeper pockets and can come in and offer higher salaries. I'm like, I just can't compete there, unfortunately. So it goes back to our culture. What makes us different, and why will that person be more successful here? And we've got, again, those things we talked about where you're just not a cog in the machine, that you're a part of who we are. You know the firm, you know the people, we get together, we like each other. Those are all big things, but also you have more opportunity for advancement here. For some of the big firms, for lawyers, a lot of times making partners, the big end game, right? Sure. And you got a lot longer runway at some of these bigger firms, but you also don't get the experience that you do here. Our attorneys pride themselves on including our younger talent, so they see the depositions and the trials way younger than they do at other places. So that the fun part of the job for a lot of people, they get to see that much earlier. So there's a lot of things where we have to really dig into. These are the things that set us apart, and that's what we're competing on.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. It sounds like culture, how you continuous improvement or the experience, that's kind of up front and center in terms of how you're recruiting somebody.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly
That's an interesting point, because I know as a small company for us, we can't just compete on salary alone. Right. And so we've got to highlight, hey, you're part of this team. You're going to be having an impact with what you do, and learning and growing. And it's a great point.
That's very rewarding. What we try. I mean, for some people, the salary is the end all be all, and that's just where the chips fall, right? But for a lot of people, you want to feel like what you do makes a difference. Yep, and absolutely. So that's where those are the people we're looking for, the problem solvers, those that feel like they can get in and really dig into a problem. Yeah, those are the people that fit here. It's
really interesting, and especially for younger demographics, Gen Z. What I hear is, if they don't feel aligned to the mission, values, purpose, they're going to go somewhere else.
That's what we're hoping for.
Right. So the fact that you can really emphasize that, I think is just, that's the future. Yeah. Right. So I love it. So as we wrap up, for other leaders who are listening today, they're navigating some of these same challenges. Hey, I've got 5 jobs, I've got 2 candidates, right? So I know a lot of people, this is what they're experiencing right now. Any lessons learned, insights, just practical pieces of advice that you could share, whether it's in the law industry or not, right? Yeah. It doesn't have to be, but any practical pieces of advice that you would share with other leaders as they're navigating some of these same things.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I say over and over is we've got to give ourselves grace, and we have to be flexible. We're all kind of navigating this brave new world together, where we're all experiencing a lot of the same pains, or at least we're experiencing a change. So it may not be the same depending on which industry you're, but this has changed us in various ways. And the talent and the Great Resignation, it has changed the way we view things. And so be flexible. You may have this brilliant idea and you put your blood, sweat, and tears and your heart into this great new thing, and then you roll it out and it's not what was needed, or it's not exactly what was needed. So be willing to say, okay, take a step back, listen to the feedback, make some adjustments or changes, and keep going. You just have to make adjustments and be flexible as we're figuring out what works and what doesn't work.
Sounds like a startup. You're iterating, right?
and it is. For law firms, that's very different. If anybody, listening or depending on how, law firms move at a glacial pace historically.
Right.
It takes forever to get anything approved or changed because lawyers in their nature want things to be perfect. Yep. They just can't take things that aren't perfect. As business professionals, we know that it's got to be good enough.
Yep.
And then you keep trying to reach better. You keep trying to reach improvement. But if I wait for it to be perfect, it'll never be launched.
Yep.
And then by the time I launch it, it's not what we need anymore. So we've got to get good enough. We've got to be willing to make some changes as we go. And then we just have to give ourselves grace if it's not perfect.
I like that. And I like also what you said about getting feedback, listening,
yeah.
right? And then continuing to evolve and iterate. So, Christy, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate just you sharing your wisdom, your insights. Ton of respect for you as a leader.
Thank you.
But really appreciate you being on The Great Retention today. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.